Hi, I want to talk about having difficult conversations in relationships. A lot of us understand, theoretically, that good relationships require communication. If our relationships are strong enough, we should be able to come into the relationships that we are in currently, especially the ones where we spend most of our time, and have difficult conversations about potentially having our needs met in different ways or just at all. Maybe we need to talk about things like how we feel as if our needs are not being met. Do you understand, firstly, what your needs are? I think sometimes we aren't able to ask for what we need because we're not sure what we need. And I'm going to say, especially as women, but I think this goes across the board. Emotionally, we may feel unfulfilled in our lives. Many people, I think, feel emotionally unfulfilled in their lives, but they don't actually know how to ask for what's missing because they're not sure themselves really what's missing. This makes a lot of sense to me because when somebody else, let's just say, comes to say to you that they need certain things, oftentimes people become very defensive when other people start asking to have their needs met. And you can see very quickly where people have not done enough work around having their own needs met. Because once I start doing work around healing and I start asking people how I want to be treated, I become a lot more aware of how I'm treating other people. Actually, in that process, it's going to be very difficult for you to ask for what you need. Or, yeah, if you don't know what you need yourself, how can you ask for what you need? How can you expect another person to get it right if you actually have not done the necessary self-discovery to know what it is that you need also? And so oftentimes I see that when in setting boundaries, and setting boundaries is healthy, guys. Setting boundaries is uncomfortable, but setting boundaries is healthy. It's a healthy way of us as humanity starting to build better relationships with one another. In relationship, when you're building good relationship, to start off with, it will actually be uncomfortable. Building good relationship is not just smooth sailing. It's uncomfortable. It's like building a good, strong, healthy body. If you just sit on the couch and eat chips the whole day, you're not going to have a good, strong, healthy body if you do nothing. In order to have a good, strong, healthy body, you have to make yourself uncomfortable by going to the gym, let's just say, exercising, moving the body, doing something with it. Also, you need to think about what you put into it. If you're not conscious of those things, then you're not going to have the body you want. And again, maybe in the early stages of your life, you can get away with doing less, yeah, with your body, because your metabolism takes care of a lot in your early years. And it's the same in your relationship. In the early days, it's like you can get by with less. But as the years go on, nothing that you put into the thing will start showing. And it will start showing when you don't have good connections, when you're supposed to see these people who are, I don't know, your friends or family or whatever else, and you actually have a feeling of dread inside of you because you actually, this is supposed to be a good relationship, but actually this thing doesn't even feel so good. If it's not feeling good, it's because you're not working on it. That's, for me, the reality of it. And because if it doesn't feel good in the moment of doing the work, that I completely understand, because doing the work is very uncomfortable. But if it doesn't feel good as a standard and you have no idea how you're even going to start rectifying this thing, because you know that the things that make you feel shitty are things that you actually need to talk about, and so you just kind of resign yourself to having bad relationships. In certain instances, you kind of shrug your shoulders and just go, "Oh, it just is like this." It's not supposed to be like that. If you in 2025, if you are still in relationships where you go, we've just been here for so long, she is my whatever the familial connection is. It's like I'm just gonna continue on because it's family, let's just say. And I'm not throwing shade at family, but I'm saying the relationships, all relationships matter, and your familial relationships matter so much. But our familial relationships are steeped in ego, and we are very stubborn around our familial relationships. We don't want to go and do the work in our familial relationships. And I get that sometimes it's very hard to do that, but if it's extremely hard to do work in your familial relationships, you need to take care of yourself. If your familial relationships hurt you, it doesn't mean that you just let that go. That's not just a relationship that's going to hurt you. It's not how it works. You're actually supposed to choose yourself, and it is very hard to choose yourself. This process of doing the work, theoretically, you can read it and you can listen to things and you can, yeah, we must set boundaries. Yeah, we must set a boundary. I've been codependent. I've been so codependent. But when it comes to it and you actually need to put into practice what it is that you've listened to and read about and discussed, but you can't, and you become defensive and you kick back and you can't take responsibility and you can't have the difficult conversations, you're not doing the work. You're not doing the work, and the work is required. If you, and it's scary because if you're not doing the work now, you are going to be part of the problem, not the solution. Like really, truly. I will say it like that. And you will feel it more. Be part of the solution, man. And I don't mean it, I don't want to point fingers and tell anybody else that they shit and whatever else. This is not what this is about. I used to be a person who was not necessarily bringing my best in relationship. I didn't know how. I didn't know. It's like I had okay-ish relationships, but they were very surface level. This has been my life. I have lived my life and I know how I feel and I know what I'm moving through and I know that my honesty with myself is what gets me to the place where I can sit in the place of feeling more peace than I've ever felt in my life. Why? Because I've chosen myself above other connections that actually haven't felt so good. And unfortunately, in certain instances where I try to work on some of these connections, where I try to come and say, in my vulnerability, I feel like this, I was kind of pushed away. Very sadly, because people are not yet at that place where they can necessarily hear what it is that I need to say in order for our connection to remain. Full stop. Your boundaries are there because you realize within your own process of loving yourself, you realize, oh, I actually don't like to be treated like that. And if I still value that connection, I have to tell that person so that I give that person an opportunity to make it an adjustment so that we can potentially stay in connection. Else, if I tell that person, as much as I'm willing, because here, if you're going to bring something up with somebody, it is really important that you also take responsibility for your trigger. Because if something's triggering you, there's something that you need to look at within yourself. Generally, you need to go back to your childhood most likely and see what childhood wound is being triggered, right? However, when you do bring this to another person, because whatever that person's done is taking you back to a place that was dark enough for you to trigger something that hurt you, most likely, right? And it would be good for that other person to actually look at what they did in that moment, to not just put it onto one person, because I believe that when there's a trigger, there's an opportunity for two people to grow. Actually, there's, I've almost never seen it where when somebody's triggered, you can go, okay, but that trigger is on you. The trigger is on me. But you did something that stirred that trigger in me, which means there's something that you did that was possibly toxic in that moment, possibly not, possibly in depending on my vibration and what's actually going on. But it would be really useful that in a connection that two people put their attention onto what it was that caused them to have a rift. If two people who love each other are suddenly not seeing eye to eye on something, it makes sense that you take pause and you ask one another and yourselves, how are we here? And make a concerted effort to give yourself perspective. Gender, it is almost, I'm going to say 100% of the time, it is not about the story. It is always about the lesson in the story. There's always a lesson in the story. And so if you're arguing about even the most mundane thing, well, and especially the most mundane things, you go, it cannot be about the story. Yes, it won't be about the story. It will always be about something deeper than the story. But the story would have been the catalyst to allow you to see your shadow, a shadow, potentially. Right? Triggers oftentimes show you where there are shadows that need to be revealed. So, like, there are so many ways in which we are as humanity that is actually indicating the path forward. We need to follow our feelings, and when we, at the moment, like if you're not feeling good, if you're not feeling great, if you are feeling really badly, you have to start acknowledging those feelings within yourself. If you feel like that because of other people, it's not just the other people. It's never just the other people. There is responsibility that you can, if you've got strong enough connections, like I'm saying, talk about the difficulties. But if things are being stirred for you all the time in connection with other people, you have to go inward because they are your feelings that are being stirred. And your feelings are valid. And so for you to say, I'm feeling like this because of that, that is valid. Your feelings are valid. And just because somebody else is unable to take responsibility, please don't allow somebody else's incapacity to take responsibility to make you invalidate your feelings. We've been invalidating our feelings for far too long. It's a dishonoring of our intuition. If we don't acknowledge our feelings, then we are dishonoring our intuition, and we're going to need our intuition. In this new year, you will, in the new year, in the years to come, because it's just getting harder and harder to know at face value, using your five senses in any case, what is real and what's not real. It's why we get ourselves into relational trouble so much, romantic relational trouble. I mean, coming out of my marriage, I'm just like bearing witness to the space of people dating and how extremely, it's almost crazy what that space actually looks like, feels like. I pick up on energy a lot, and people are scared at the moment. People are just going like, just don't even bother because it's toxic everywhere. And it's almost like maybe like just stop. Maybe like we need to just take pause, because what I realize through my journey is that 2024 was a year of me learning to love myself, and I needed to keep pulling myself back to no, dear, it's not about somebody else is not going to fulfill these needs and desires within you. It has to come from within yourself. 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 And you go, but we are built for connection. We are. But it's almost like if you haven't learned to love yourself the way you need to be loved, the way you want to be loved, somebody else is not going to be able to do it. You can only be known as deeply as you've gotten to know yourself. And you can only be loved as deeply as you've learned to love yourself fully. Anyways, guys, thank you for listening, if you've listened this far. And if you have, I would like to hear about maybe how you navigate difficult conversations in relationships. Are you managing to do that? I mean, we may start with some relationships and not with others, but it's good to start practicing having more difficult conversations with the people that you feel most comfortable with. Stand up for yourself when you need to stand up for yourself, even if you make the people a little bit cross. The people who love you they may get cross, they may be offended, but they'll go and they'll sit with it and they'll ask themselves the necessary questions so that you can actually build deeper connection, more intimate connection. Because what happens when you start speaking more honestly and truthfully is that, and openly about your feelings, is that you actually build more intimacy and connection. If you're feeling empty, because most likely because you don't have deep intimacy and connections. If all of your connections are just surface level connections, and you're always just acting as if you're fine and happy and you just go with the flow, but you're not everybody's got deep feelings. And if you were too scared to go into the past, if you were too scared, like, how far back you're needing to go? You're needing to go to your childhood. If you're wanting to heal, your healing is almost always in your childhood. It's again that familial space. We don't want to go there because we think it's not worth our time and our effort, because we do this with our childhoods. Them, our siblings, our parents. We want to do work for the partner that we want, the person that we're in love with, those cool friends that we want to be. Actually, it's like you're not going to have any of that stuff if you don't go back and do the work there where you're so stubborn. I'm sending you all so much love.